Hi, everybody. It's Andre from the Eaglesoft Field Guide. I'm here with some friends of mine, which I love doing. I love talking to friends. Todd Garfinkel and Sheryl Garfinkel. They're with DDS Match, but they also used to be my neighbors. They used to live right near me, and now they've left me in the state of Pennsylvania, and now you guys are in the state of Maryland, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're in Annapolis.
So tell me about the territory you guys cover. DDS Match is a national company. So what's your sort of neck of the woods?
So our footprint is specifically Maryland, DC, and Virginia. We we have a focus footprint up in Northern Virginia, but we do take care of clients throughout the state of Virginia.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And so everybody knows these guys have been friends for, geez, I mean, 15 years plus,
Almost 20 years on
yeah.
it.
So, it's great to connect, and we work together at Patterson Dental, so we have that connection, and we've been friends forever. And like I said, neighbors, like literally, we almost could walking distance apart. So this is great to kind of get together and talk about like what's going on in the world. I mean, right now we're recording this at the end of April, right after we've been out of dentistry for pretty much a month and a half.
Yeah.
The date that I've kind of put in the sand is March 17th is kind of my like 9/11 day.
Us as well.
Yeah. So, what I wanted to talk to these guys about is what we're seeing out there with transitions. I mean, that's a big part of that's primarily what you guys do. And what do you guys see on the buyer side? What you guys see on the seller side? What you hear like going on in the market? I hear things from staff members now with what's going on with staff members being furloughed. I'm hearing from doctors more. It's been interesting. But what are you guys hearing like from your doctors, from your buyers and sellers? What are you hearing about the temperature of things?
We're actually having a fair amount of conversations. We're a lot of buyers are in touch. A lot of sellers, I think, are reevaluating their lives, their position. We only represent sellers in transitions, but we do a lot of work with buyers, trying to understand, what their vision is, what they're looking for, what their ideas are, and then working hard to make a match and all that. So we do keep the channels of communication open to buyers as well as our clients, the sellers. I think, right now it's a time where buyers are, if they're associates currently, they've got time to reevaluate. They might be, we're hearing things like they're reevaluating going back to the position they were in, where they're at the mercy of somebody else and being furloughed or being let go, versus taking the time to evaluate and dive into the idea of being a practice owner. We're seeing really across the country with all of our associates, a lot of activity from buyers saying, hey, I think this might be the time for me to look for a practice. And there's potentially going to be some deals to be had during a short period of time, while there are a number of sellers looking to make a transition. And there's uncertainty in the market.
Yeah.
So from a seller's point of view, as you can imagine, so these sellers, some of them are getting a taste of what it's like to not go to the office every day and not grind from 8 till 6 at night on, 4 days a week clinically and maybe another day administratively. And they're reassessing the balance of life, and they're saying, I was thinking about doing this anyways in the next 6 months, next 18 months. Let's take a look at what it would be like now.
Yeah.
For us, Andre, we're real big fans, and I know you're a big fan of having a plan. We're big fans of talking to people way ahead of time, sometimes 5 years ahead of time. In fact, that's what we would prefer, is to talk to people 5 years before they start down the road of actually transitioning their practice. And in this time, in this kind of a crisis situation, we really are endorsing that even more strongly, so that we're encouraging people, if they have this on their mind, to stop, contact the advisors that they trust, or start to build a team of advisors that they trust, maybe a transition specialist, maybe a lawyer, their accountant, CPA, consultant,
Mm-hmm.
and start to explore that idea of what it would look like to transition, of course, taking into account this kind of a setting situation.
Yeah. I think another thing that buyers are reassessing is, what is it going to take? What kind of effort do I need to put in to bring my office back up to a potentially new standard? And wondering, is this something I really want to invest in? And how is my staff going to react? Do I have the energy? Do I have the wherewithal to do that? Or is it time for me to, even though I love doing dentistry, this part of it may not be worth it in that cost balance of life and relearning new protocols
with sellers.
With sellers. Yeah, specifically with sellers. So
yeah.
And I think with our buyers, they see opportunity, and they know that this is going to be potentially a V-shaped curve, and they have opportunity to move outside of, as Todd mentioned, the associateship and go into ownership and sail forward in their vision of that as well. So.
Yeah. And do you guys see, I mean, and again, we've been doing this for a while, so we've seen sort of the arc in, trend, and who are our doctors, what the expectations for ownership is like, are you seeing trends with new students who are looking to buy as opposed to looking to be associates? And this is going to change a lot, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're starting to see that line blur a little bit. It was much prior to COVID-19. I think for us, we were experiencing typically a new grad going into residency, even then coming out and having, getting some experience under their belt before they decide to start pull that trigger or look at pulling the trigger for practice ownership. Starting to see that line blur just a little bit, for sure. That's interesting that you picked up on that. Are you hearing different pieces of that as well?
Yeah. And again, there are a lot of people who are reassessing selling, which means there are practices that are now sort of dangling that weren't available before, And I think, like you said, I think a lot of people looked at this and went, wow, I didn't realize, I had a doctor who probably after about 3 weeks of being out of the office said, I can't believe how much less my overhead is. I mean, it's sad to say, but how much less my overhead is. And then realizing maybe when I come back into the office, I can be leaner, meaner, I can do some things differently. And I think that's a big part of what we're seeing in the field.
I would, it's really interesting that you said that, because I was thinking the other day, it's really a time, I think, for practice owners to take a good look at how they're running their business, to work with somebody such as yourself or other advisors, team members, if you would, that can guide them and give them real clear direction on becoming lean, becoming more system driven, looking at what sort of money is being left on the table that they should be gathering and collecting. It's time to become more efficient in the business side. And we know typically dentists are not that business oriented. And that stems, I think, all the way back to school, not having a lot of business education in dental school. Yeah.
But one of the things I was saying in another interview that I did was, I think this is the first time that dentists have gone from becoming the CTO, the chief technology operator, to becoming the chief financial operator. They've had to make this transition. And even if they had an accountant or whatever who did the books for them, this is the first time they really had to dig in. That's, for my side of things, people saying, hey, Andre, I've never had to run a report before. How do I do this, out of the other thing? And now they're seeing the report printing and going, how does this connect with that? And what's going with that? I literally, as soon as before I got on the call with you guys, I had a doctor who had to reach out to, I don't know if you guys know David Harris from Prosperident, who only does embezzlement and fraud investigations. Okay. Because all of a sudden the light comes on and now you see the cockroaches, living in your basement. Yeah. So it's been a different situation for a lot of the business owners. And it's just funny, now we can start calling the dentists the business owners. So
I was going to say also just to add to that, I think not only just how to run a report and to understand the practice management side of it, but also as they're applying for PPP and all the different loan opportunities that are potentially out there, that they've had to dive in and really understand their overhead, their cash flow, and how that equates to their business, and maybe seeing some numbers that they hadn't fully understood because they're doing dentistry, to their
Yeah, it's a hard business. And, I tell everybody and they're like, wow, what you do all day long with training and all that kind of stuff is, being on a plane. And I think to myself, I would never want to sit chairside and do what you do. That is just the hardest job I could imagine.
Right. We've talked about that before.
Yeah, I love what I'm doing compared to that. Now, one of the things that you said that I thought was really cool. Now, putting together, advisors is something I always think about. And I think, again, going back to dentistry is a really hard job, and you're pretty much doing it alone, and you're doing it from sun up to sundown, coming home and having to deal with the family life. What do you guys see as like the sort of best combination of advisors? I mean, lawyer, and again, you're going to see people as they transition out, as they transition in. What do you see like as a good sort of mix of advisors? Like what, generally what titles?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the typical team that we see is going to be a CPA. And this would go for all of the advisors that they're working with. They need to click with them. It needs to be a good fit, a good vibe, a good relationship, and they need to be able to trust their advisors. CPA, a lawyer for when you need a lawyer, right? It's not somebody you're going to be working with regularly. A consultant, we find, is key. We're not, everybody has a different view on consulting, but I think especially right in this time period, to have kind of a specific target relationship with a consultant, not something that you're going to necessarily be involved with for 5 or 10 years, but right now, in the next 6 months, the next 12 months, the next 18 months, get involved with a consultant that is business oriented, that can help you through that learning curve and understanding how's your business running, where are the loose pieces that you can tighten up to get the most out of it. If we look back at 2007, 2008, we both experienced that there were offices that had some of the best years they had following 2007, 2008, because they were in the right mode. They had the right mentality.
Yep.
They had a good system, and they kind of flicked a few switches and adjusted slightly, and were able to really take advantage of the market. One of the things, I gotta slip this quote in because I love it, from Warren Buffett. I think it goes something like, who's skinny dipping when the tide goes out, right? So
that's awesome.
This is a time when there are things that we could have perhaps let slip in our practices previously, that now, man, they're coming to light, and they're coming up strong and right in front of our face, and we've got to deal with them.
Yeah. And I think also a couple things is there, as doctors are looking to bring on trusted advisors, that they're dental specific, because it is a unique business, and it is something that they want to have somebody that understands the uniquenesses of dentistry, especially, consultants are obvious, but perhaps lawyers and accountants. And there's good resources out there. And as you have one, I'm sure for you probably have an arsenal of people that if a doctor asks you, that you can say, hey, if you need a good dental lawyer, here's a couple names to call, give them a call, interview them, and see if they're a good fit for you. Same with CPAs. One of the things that we're also really recommending doctors do as they're tightening their belts and looking at ways to streamline is to really go to some of the basics as, do I participate with insurance? Do I want to continue participating at the same rate that I am? If the answer is yes, that I do, when's the last time I managed my fees? Have I done an increase? Should I renegotiate with the insurance companies? How do I go about doing that? Do I need to bring in an in-office membership plan because there is no longer dental benefits, or what we call the dental coupon? And really take some hard looks at that, and understand what they can do and what that actually does to their bottom line, working smarter, not harder. They don't have to see more patients. They're actually getting better reimbursement. We saw today some reports where it was like $1.2 million production with a $500,000 write-off. It just
Yeah, it was
like,
43%
yeah,
write-off.
it was
Yeah.
just
Right.
stabbed me in the heart.
That's a
Yeah.
lot to pay for patience. But
Yeah. And a lot of times that is, that's ego driven. Sometimes I always used to say, what you put in your bank account is what your fees are, and what you put on your price tags is your ego. You've got a $12,000 crown, but you get $750 from the insurance. So it's there's a balance that needs to be done.
Right.
And I would assume that's part of like your 5-year plan, your roadmap, when you're working with somebody over that period of time to come up with some real ideas of where we need to be, also to make the practice
no, 100%.
attractive. Yeah.
I should add, because I don't want it to come across the wrong way.
Yeah.
We don't judge the insurance or no insurance one way or the other. It's a model that works for a lot of people.
Sure.
It's just startling when you see somebody working so hard and giving away 40-45% of the fee that they're charging. So that's a tough part. But man, it's so great that you brought up the in-office membership, because really, as we're looking at the landscape of what's happening, as the dust starts to settle, I think we're going to see people that are going to have to pull out of dental insurance and pull back. And what an opportune time to bring in an in-office membership plan for a set fee. I don't know if you have opinions on that.
I love them. I think any office that I work with, and I did one yesterday for an office, I think it is the best opportunity. And again, coming out of this, you're going to find that a lot of people don't have coverage. They've gone on furlough or something like that, and they've lost coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're coming back. And as a recovering front desk person, I hear people all the time saying, calling into the office and saying, what plan should I buy? Well, definitely the one that we're selling. You definitely don't want to buy a plan that's going to cost you, $300 a year, which then tells you can't have an implant, or you can't have that. You can only have a partial denture. So when we build these plans around the office, we can have anything we want and build all kinds of things into it. So I'm a big proponent of membership plans. I think that is the path of the future for
I hope so. Yeah.
One other advisor or team member that I would bring up that it might be an opportune time for many right now is somebody who can negotiate leases. So, especially in this environment, things are shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there might be an opportunity to gain a little bit on lease agreements in terms. There are professionals that focus on dental practice leases. One that comes to mind is Car Realty. Mm-hmm. Good guys, and that's what they do. And they actually and they don't charge the dentists that they work for. It all comes out of the property management.
That's interesting. I never thought about that side of things. That's great.
Yeah. So maybe, especially as it being, there's certain hard assets, or certain hard expenses you can't get past.
Right.
And that's one of them, right? That's there no matter what. And it's going to be, so that might be an opportune time where property management is saying, listen, we really are having a hard time filling spaces right now. Mm-hmm. Might even be it might be a good time to negotiate those terms.
And I will say, to add on to what Todd is saying, is I think within that, as the dentist is maybe considering that, is to say, how long do I want to be here? Mm-hmm. What is and that's where that 5-year, 3-year plan, let's not negotiate a 10-year lease when I'm only going to really realistically be here for 3 to 5 years. Let's maybe do a 3-year lease or 5-year lease, because it sets up the buyer to be in a better position. It sets up the seller to be in a better position, and hopefully it's a win-win, and maybe even for the property owner, because they're getting that long-term tenant, which they love. So again, that's both in the now and the future. Those are important considerations.
That's a great point. And in general, we find that property management groups love dentists.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they're just solid. Rarely are they an issue of any sort. From a financial point of view, they're one of the lowest risks out there from a business perspective. So they're anxious to keep them in place.
Yeah, and we know that it's really, really, really hard to move a dental office. So usually when they're there for good. So yeah, I mean that's a really good point. And I have a good friend who's a property manager, and one of the things he always says is, I love when a dentist wants to move in, because usually they're plumbing and they're not moving for a long time.
Yeah.
And if they're moving, typically somebody else is coming in and taking that space, who's a dentist. So usually a good long-term lease. So tell me some of the other things that are going on with you guys, and some of the things that you guys are seeing out there in the market, and just what's going on with you guys.
I just want to make one more point,
Yeah,
maybe not outside of the lease, but one of the things I think that it's an important place for office staff and doctors to think about re-ramping up their businesses. They come back online. What is it going to take to get a patient to say, yes, I want to come in? And there'll be probably 3 different types of patients. There'll be patients that are just going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how long you were closed. Give me on the first books. And then the other ones that need to have some reassurance of PPEs, infection control protocols. And although it's very commonplace in the dental office to do what we do, I don't think for the patient that they don't fully understand our understanding of cross-contamination and infection control and sepsis management. And so to really spell that out, and to be it in a letter, be it in a video, be it a tour while a patient comes in, whatever they need to do to let their patients feel comfortable. And of course, the third group, I don't want to leave them out there like, yeah, I'm not coming in, because I never really like to come in anyway. So this is all the reason why not to.
Right.
But then the other,
and they're going to need some specific marketing.
Yeah.
And really, it's. Yeah.
But I think the other thing that to speak to both dentists and staff is that they may need to be a little flexible in their hours and in the way that they work. That perhaps they come in on a weekend, or if they're closed, if it's a Monday through Thursday practice, that they are open on Friday, or they expand their hours, or just in order to give some convenience, because the people that are their patients and customers have been also furloughed potentially, and to take time off work and to lose that revenue is just not going to be an option. I think that there's a good amount of people that are struggling, and maybe to expand their thought, even though it may be short term, it'll help them in the long run, and it's a sacrifice probably worth making.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, again, this is a new normal. This is the kind of things that we went through. And I keep looking at as my career has gone from, Y2K and 9/11 and, all the different things that we've gone through, but each new normal has set this tone. And, you think about the AIDS epidemic, and again, we had to focus on talking about sterilization and the way that we sterilize. You think about steri centers, you think about how that became a focal point in the office. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a new focal point on not the steri center so much as the operatory being a steri center.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that now it's the new normal, and we have to focus on that in our marketing and our way of doing things. And I think having the team, again, not my word, I always use crew, but the team all on the same page, so that we're singing from the same hymnal. So we're giving the customers the same kinds of things. That's a big part of this.
Yeah, and a lot of the conversations right now and we're doing a lot of communication with clients, with buyers. We're just staying in touch with people. Right now, they're starting to be, especially in Virginia, they're going to open up dental offices May 1st.
Tomorrow. Okay.
So they're starting to think about, how do we do this? Realistically, how do we do this? Scrambling to get PPE, even though they've been trying for 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get it. Working with their crew, with their staff, to get everybody on board with procedures. They're kind of working through what is this going to look like, this new normal that we're entering. Did you want to answer?
Yeah, no, I just think in thinking about that is, that their distributor rep is a real good resource for them. And maybe that's something that, somebody at the front desk or an assistant takes care of, whereas maybe now it's time for the doctor to actually have a conversation, a relationship with their rep who comes into the office where they buy their supplies, in that they can give them some tricks of the trade of getting something, or they may have some resources, or they may have some understanding, because as you mentioned first on, is the doctor is a doctor of one who, unless he goes to some other sort of society meeting or whatever, he just has his head down, or she has her head down doing dentistry and doesn't have resources, whereas this distributor rep is in and out of offices all the time and is, staying on the cutting edge of what's available, what's required, and really reaching out to them and asking for assistance would probably be advisable.
This is one of the things that I've seen over the course of my years in dentistry, is the relationship that people have with manufacturer reps and supply reps. That relationship has changed over the years, and it needs to get back tighter, because I see, I'm in all these Facebook groups, and I'm seeing these doctors buying, PPE from wherever, getting shipments of these gray market masks. And the funny thing is, all these masks, I mean, I got a couple of N95 masks recently, and they fall apart. They're not something that you could wear, they're just cheaply made. And the funny thing is, I was in a conversation with a doctor and their Patterson rep yesterday, and the Patterson rep said, I can't get you a level 3 mask right now, but I can certainly get you level 2 masks and shields. And instead of the doctor going out and buying, trying to source these level 3 masks, he said, look, this is what I can get you. Let me help you. And unless you have those conversations, you're really out there in the woods right now. So it's a great opportunity to reconnect. Yeah.
That's true. I would say, just to give a little perspective on what we're seeing specifically in the transitions market, or what we think might happen. And again, this is with a lot of caveat of, we're not sure, nobody's sure. You can read 20 different articles and get 20 different opinions right now. But in talking to other industry professionals and watching endless webinars, right? It's not as though these patients are going to disappear, right? Patients are coming back to the office. We were just talking about it. I know you have an 80-20 thought on it, but patients are coming back. So the underlying structure of what made the businesses successful and what they are relatively still in place. Yeah. And so, we have a number of deals that were in process, and when this all happened, and everything went on pause. So the pause button got pushed for sure. And of course, rightfully so, buyers are saying, hey, let's have a conversation about this, because I need some reassurance about the value of this practice. And that's understandable.
Sure.
I think from the seller's point of view, typically they're thinking, no, this is the value and this is what I want it to be.
Yeah. They already booked a tea time in Hilton Head.
That's right. They already got their clubs in their bag ready to go.
Their boats are ready.
The key here is going to be flexibility. I mean, nobody needs to go back to square one, to absolute scratch. No. These deals are in place. The underlying value of the practice is there. We're seeing and hearing a lot of comments and working with performance clauses. So the basic idea there is, hey, listen, we agree that the practice is worth this. We want the practice from the buyer's perspective. But we want some reassurance that it's going to come back to 75, 80, 85, 90% of where it was. So perhaps we look at some sort of creative solution where we stick some money in an escrow, we pay you the rest as we were going to, and we proceed with the deal. We look at a timetable, whatever that might be, whether it's 90 days, 4 months, 5 months, and we want to be back to a certain percentage of the prior year's performance or whatever benchmark is established. And that gives everybody reassurance. So, I think there's going to be more involvement maybe from the seller side, where they get a little skin in the game. Maybe they're carrying a note. I know banks are kind of talking about that a little bit, as to that would help out a lot. So I think just from a overall perspective, both buyer and sellers, it's really going to be just a matter of being flexible. We have heard this from a number of buyer reps. So again, we represent sellers, but we communicate a lot with buyer reps. And they often talk to their buyers about, listen, if you're going to be negotiating for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, think hard about what the long-term cost of that's going to be. Right. What you're buying here when you buy a dental practice is goodwill, right? You're buying the relationships, the relationship with the selling doctor, the relationship with the staff, obviously the relationship with the patients. you want that to be as healthy and as happy as possible as you move forward in taking over that practice. If somebody gets into the nitty gritty down in the mud, wrestling over $20,000 or $30,000, which in all due respect is a drop in the bucket,
Yeah.
when you're looking at owning a practice 15, 20, 30 years, you got to really think about what's the long-term effect of that. So we're hearing that even echoed now during this uncertain time is, there's got to be flexibility, but everybody's got to think about what's the end goal and how do we reach that and give everybody it should be in a win-win. I mean, we think of that no matter what the circumstances are. We're always after a win-win solution. Like I said, regardless of us representing sellers, we think for everybody's well-being, it's important to get to that win-win solution.
Well, and let's talk a couple of things then, like bigger picture things. Before 317, did you guys see trends starting to happen? Did you see, again, the course of my career, I saw dentistry skew female. Our doctors are female. That those changes happen. Everybody is always looking at the corporate dentistry changing the landscape of things. Were you guys seeing some things that were happening in dentistry before this happened? And do you see those things continuing? Whatever you guys think. What are you guys thinking?
Well, the first one that comes to mind was it was clearly a seller's market.
Okay.
Especially in our area. Maryland, DC, and Virginia is very attractive to dentists and to younger dentists especially. A lot of buyer interest in this area. We see that leveling off more. We see that becoming an equal market or even potentially a buyer's market in some fashion because of the shift. So I think that is the first one that hops into my mind from a trend perspective. We with regards to the corporate steady growth we've seen over the last 10, 15 years. In recent, we saw it slowing down a little bit. The capital behind those ventures were hesitating and pausing and reevaluating, or at least it seemed that way to us.
And even some of our colleagues around the country, they've actually, some of the other DDS match people have been contacted by DSOs because perhaps they bought something and it wasn't as profitable, and now the DSO is looking to offload it to a private buyer.
Like clean house a little bit.
Yeah. So maybe some of the zest of buying has waned a little bit with DSOs, which I think for Todd and I are very, very, I could get on a soapbox on my desire to maintain private dentistry, and we're happy to see that maybe there is some leveling off of that.
Yeah. And I think, with this COVID-19 situation, there's going to be opportunity for DSOs to sweep in and start chasing practices a little bit stronger, given that pause time. So other trends, maybe with banks, that's a good one to talk about.
Yeah. What's happening there with money, availability of money?
Hugely available up until 317. Still very much available. Banks that we talk to, they're open for business, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. There are some banks that are definitely putting in restrictions, even though that they're waiting for business to pick back up and get into the game fully. They're open for business, so they're talking, they're seeing, taking care of due diligence, they're doing evaluations of practices and of buyers. But they're putting in place caveats like performance, like I was just talking about, performance standards. Obviously the practice, most of them want the practice open and functioning before they're going to lend money, and that really comes just from not putting the buyer in an immediate risk situation.
Sure.
The different, without specifying lenders, there are some that are aggressively going after the market right now.
Okay.
And then others, even one of the biggest, is on a much more conservative track.
Yeah. But that's also a good trend, because if the banks are ready to move, that means it. And again, we talked about this. Dentistry is such a sort of a bulletproof industry. it's not going anywhere, and it's pretty consistent in growth, and it's pretty consistent in return on investment. So it's one of those things at a bank, if you see the banks, if we saw that the banks were saying, no, we're not going into the dentistry market anymore, that's time to be afraid.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I know you want to talk about it because you have some thoughts on
Well,
that.
I just think that we've, as Todd alluded to, we've seen banks be on both ends of the spectrum to the point where allowing 6-month deferments, additional working capital for buyers. So it's not a gloom and doom for buyers who want to invest in their long-term profession and life. So
Yeah, and they're in a lot of ways we believe, and I think Sheryl believes it even stronger than I do, that banks will probably be somewhat of the tip of the spear on this.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, Andre, if they're willing to lend, then that means everything's good.
Yeah.
That the water's okay to go into.
the tide's rising.
Yeah,
Right.
I love that. I'm gonna find that quote. I love that. Yeah. So we got a couple minutes, about 5 minutes to get into it, but I want to find out from you guys, and we get to talk every now and then, but I want to find out from you guys, like what's the best thing that's happening in the market? What's happening with you guys, and what do you see the trends happening? What's the lay of the land? What's the forecast that you guys see, and what's happening?
And if you're okay with it, I'm going to turn the tables on you and ask you kind of your opinion on something, and it ties a little bit into what you're asking. But I'm curious about your opinion on teledentistry. We're hearing a lot of talk about that. Just watched an ADA webinar that was heavily discussing the idea of, what are the insurance companies going to do from a code point of view?
Yeah.
Where is this here to stay? Those things. What are your thoughts on it?
I don't think it's a good fit for dentistry, honestly. My dermatologist, I got a thing right there on my nose. I talked to my dermatologist, and just like we're having this conversation, I can go look, and she goes, oh yeah, here's an ointment you can get. I don't see us doing that in dentistry. And I think it's a great value add. I think it's a great way for us to keep, like, especially during this period of time, if somebody has pain and we have a conversation, I can say, that looks like something we can see you in a couple weeks for, and let's make sure you're on the schedule as soon as we get back open. It's a great way to keep the relationship open, but I don't see it as an income stream. For me, I don't see it. And the worst part is, no matter what the ADA or the insurance companies say, if we have this evaluation today, you're not going to get one in 6 months. They're going to take from one to give to the other. And that's, my opinion. But I know that with frequency limits, because what they're telling us is, yes, use the teledentistry code, but also use an emergency exam code in combination, which means you now will not be able to get your periodic exam when it's time for your checkup in September. So it's a great idea, but yeah, it's going to be backhanded. And I think if they said, during the period, if you had an exam while your office was closed, we're not going to count that towards your future exams. But they haven't said that. They just said, here's a code that you can use. But I don't know what's going to happen when we get back to September and we're billing for those periodic exams. Is this emergency exam going to count against it? And a lot of offices, a lot of plans only have 2 exams per year. They don't have any other leeway on that. So I think it's a great tool. I think it's a great way to start doing cosmetic consults. But again, did anybody ever charge for consultations, really? For the most part?
Sure.
I think it's a great way to be able to connect to patients. Part of what I've always taught in my offices is, in what I did in a practice, is if somebody said, I'm having pain and we're new in the area, the first thing I would say to somebody is, would you like our doctor to call you back this evening and talk about it? 90% of the patients said, no, I'll come in next week when you scheduled me, that's fine. But the ones who said, wow, that's amazing, the doc will call me back.
Yeah.
And I see that for teledentistry being, again, it's just a value add for our practice. But from an income stream, I just don't see it. And I don't see where dentistry can do much through teledentistry.
Right.
Root canal through the computer.
That would be great. But, Sheryl, hold the instrument like this. So as much as it's being touted, and a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon during this, I think they're going to wind up with patients calling in September with a denial
Yeah.
and being very mad that the doctor charged them for a phone call.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the only problem I have with teledentistry. I think it's fantastic as a customer service person.
For a trust building and
Yeah.
establishment and that
Yeah.
way.
And it popped into my mind because something you said earlier, and I wanted to mention, like kind of tag on to it. As dentists are starting to ramp back up and going into, into seeing patients, I think that to reassure them with a video, even if it's a phone call, and they take their phone and they say, hey, let me show you what we're doing to protect you, and they're walking around the office showing them odds and ends, it's going to go a long way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And we personally know doctors who we worked together with that we know this is the perfect way for them to touch the patients that they've worked with in the past.
Yeah.
There are certain people who this is a great opportunity to, even a post-op call, to do it face-to-face is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, but they would have always done it that way, but this is just another tool to be able to use it. So that's where I see this going.
And interestingly, just to speak to what you just said there a little bit, I am of the age that video conferencing is okay, but after a month of it, I'm like, oh yeah, whatever, bring it on.
Yeah.
Where our kids are very much like, hey, they prefer video calling over or Zooming or whatever over a phone call. And I think for those that hadn't dipped their toe in the water, that this has been a really nice opportunity to get comfortable with it, proficient with it, and to actually maybe for their patients, as you're saying, post-op care, checkups, even if it's a staff member, to have that face-to-face contact, because also it gives one more layer of not just a voice saying I'm fine, but you get a visual too.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody recently about teledentistry and talking about just what we're doing now with Zoom and this kind of stuff. And they said something which was, I heard years ago, and I didn't think about it this way, but if you were born in 2002, you've never lived in a world where you didn't have a African American or a Black president. You've never lived in a world where there were the World Trade Centers, and you've never lived in a world where you couldn't pick up the phone and see grandmom. And that is a weird thing. We don't think like that, but it's second nature to be able to go, oh, I want to talk to grandmom. Hi, grandmom. How are you?
Yeah.
It's like if you were born when I was born, you go, only Dick Tracy could do that. Have a telephone that you could talk to somebody, or the Jetsons. But so it's a whole different way, and we're going to transition our patients into that. And what we're doing now with using iPads to check people in, this is going to be a big part of this, and the dentistry has changed dramatically. So
yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So any final thoughts, guys? I want to get a couple things from you guys. Yeah. What's the best way to get in touch with you guys? Because that's one thing I want to make sure we do. How to get in touch with you guys, and some final thoughts.
Well, let's do the final thoughts, and then we'll do how to get in touch.
Okay.
So for me, a final thought is in amongst this time where it feels a little uncertain and a little potentially pessimistic, that we are actually seeing real positive things come in transitions from both buyers, sellers, bankers, advisors. Everybody is on a real positive trajectory, not to be Pollyanna or pie in the sky, but that with due diligence and thoughtful moving, forward motion, that it's something that a dentist can comfortably, especially somebody that had wanted to sell and now thinks they're set back, they just had to take 10 steps backwards. I just don't think that that's true. I think that maybe they'll need to work an extra few months, but it's not going to be an extra few years to be able to see, and that they can carry forward with their plans. For those of dentists that have it rattling around in the back of their head in 5 or 8 or so 10 years, this hopefully is a wake-up call to understand, hey, what do I need to know about my business? How do I need to streamline my business? How do I need to surround myself with good advisors, and to be able to take those actions to be well prepared moving forward?
And I would say, and this is alluding to or something you alluded to earlier, Andre, and that is this is not the first crisis we've been through and that we've seen in the dental industry. It's a new kind of crisis, but it's certainly not the first. And we look back and yes, it can be a rough road to get there, but it always comes back, and it always comes back stronger than it was before. We're encouraging everybody we talk to stay positive, again, not being Pollyanna about it, but to keep the positive in their eyesight, and not to get torn down by the what ifs, but really taking action helps with that a lot. And as we speak to people, we're talking about making plans. So not just try to have a reaction, a knee jerk to it, but actually setting some plans in place. They might have to adjust a little bit here and there, but actually get something in place so you have something structured to guide yourself by. And that comes from a good team. We look at what we do, and a good transition is different than a good transaction.
Sure.
And we look at the good transaction coming from a good transition plan being in place. So that's where it goes back to the kind of the 5-year thing is that we want this to ultimately be everything you want it to be when it happens, but we need a plan ahead of time in order to get us to that point. So just really stay positive the best we can.
I agree. And I think, like I said, like we've been talking about, this is a bulletproof system that, again, putting our ducks in a row, that 5-year plan, you're gonna wind up with a bulletproof outcome. It really is. So guys, I really appreciate it. Give me some info. And I'm gonna make sure that goes down here on the bottom of the screen too. Give me a website, give me phone numbers, give me everything so everybody wants to get in touch with you.
Sure. So to get in touch with, we both have email addresses. So Todd's is tgarfinkel@ddsmatch.com. Mine is sgarfinkel, then that would be EL, not LE, at ddsmatch.com. Our website, ddsmatch.com. And we have a personal website as well, but you can get to us in that method. Todd's phone number is 443-422-9509. And mine is 443-422-9866.
Cool. And I'll make sure that that's listed under our pictures here. And I really appreciate you guys spending some time with me. Too bad I can't walk over to the house and hang out with you.
We'd love to have you.
I drove by your old house and it still looks great. So
thank you. What a pleasure talking with you, Andre, really.
You too, guys. And be safe out there, and we'll talk real soon.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.